In this video, we're going to take a little bit of time to look at perfect passive participles. Before we can actually look at perfect passive participles, we first need to make sure we know what a participle is. At its simplest definition, a participle is a verbal adjective. But that's just a basic definition. What that actually means is that a participle is a verb acting like an adjective. We see these quite a bit in English, most of the time being used in a present sense. The running boy would be an example of the word running, a verb being used in that sentence as an adjective to describe the boy. In Latin, participles have one of three tenses. Those tenses are present, future, and perfect. Right now, we're just going to be looking at the perfect passive participles. When dealing with a perfect passive participle, it is important that we know how to translate it. For a perfect passive participle, we most often translate these using the format of either having been verbed or simply verbed. So if our verb was a word such as amo, meaning to love, the perfect passive participle would be translated as either having been loved or simply loved. Now that we know how they are going to be translated, let's look at how they're going to be formed in Latin. And there's three things to keep in mind. The first is that we need to start with the fourth principal part of the verb. Now this fourth principal part, you might remember, we've mentioned before, can be called either the accusative supine or even the perfect passive participle. Once we have taken the fourth principal part, we simply need to change the ending of this fourth principal part so that it will agree with the modified noun. Since the perfect passive participle is an adjective, it is going to agree with the noun it is modifying in case, number, and in gender. Keep in mind that that means that there are going to be a total of 30 different forms. The two numbers, singular and plural, the 5 cases, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative, and of course all 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Now when we're working with the perfect passive participle, we're going to want to make sure that we are using first and second declension endings. Now let's look at an example. Say we have the verb amo. Amo, amare, amavi, amatum, meaning to love. We would begin by taking the fourth principal part of this verb, which is amatum. Our stem will be formed by removing that um. So if we were to fill out a chart in the singular, we would start by simply taking the fourth principal part and removing the letters um. After that, we would simply add the corresponding singular endings of the first and second declension. So, in the masculine, we see the second declension endings, us, long I, long o, and long o in the ablative. For the feminine, we see first declension endings, a, ae, ae, am, and long a. And the neuter also will be using second declension like the masculine, but remember that in the neuter, the nominative will end with The others will match up nicely with the masculine forms, long I in the genitive, long o in the dative, in the accusative, and long o in the ablative. To do the plural forms, we would do the exact same thing. We would begin by creating the stem by simply removing from the fourth principal part. We then, once again, add the first and second declension endings. For the masculine, we will again add the second declension endings. Long I, long O rum, long is, long os, and long is. For the feminine, once again, we use the first declension endings, ae, long arum, long is, long as, and long is. Finally, for the neuter, it looks very similar to the masculine endings since it is also using second declension endings. But of course, we need to remember that our rules governing the neuter tell us that in the plural, our nominative will end with a short a, and also the accusative will match the nominative. So what we see here is short a, longo rum, long is, short a in the accusative, and long is in the ablative. These are the forms in the plural of the perfect passive participle. Now that we've looked at these, hopefully you'll see that it's really quite simple to create a perfect passive participle.